All right, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody. I know it's been a little while since our last Kraken, and honestly, folks, I was planning for one, and it was just the same thing over and over again. You know, Ukraine, Russia, this and that. But finally, I was able to piece together some what I deem to be, in my humble opinion, some valuable information. I think you folks should be informed about, and then of course think critically about. So again, let's jump into it. So first and foremost, let me just say that a good friend of the show, someone who I've gotten to know over the last handful of days and weeks, Mr. John Greenwald from the Black Vault, recently requested, if I am not mistaken, a Freedom of Information Act pertaining to Vice President Kamala Harris's Havana Syndrome incidences. Apparently, he was, as I understand it, flat out denied to be given that. Again, I imagine it's probably still being studied and what have you, but honestly, I think it is safe to say that the era of direct energy weapons on world leaders, if we, again, arguably, if she truly is running things in certain regards as the vice president, or if that's just a, figurative position as we talk about more so on the, main episodes and Patreon and all of that, let's just say hypothetically, presuming her roles are as legitimate as is what is told in the military-industrial complex-run media. It seems like whichever country is doing this, or nation, or what have you, seems to be, no shame, if you will. Now, look, I'm going to be honest with you folks. I'm not trying to say there's some psyop at hand. I have no evidence of this, but if we want to truly think critically, we also have to consider that maybe these DEW attacks on the vice president may be coming from within. Because again, let's keep in mind, there are various factions that do not like current levels of leadership and what have you. I'm not saying that is what is. I'm saying that is one slice of the pie or metaphorical pizza in which we need to consider, right? Sometimes the enemy's already on behind behind your side of the fence. You know what I mean? But possibly, probably not. Just wanting to speculate the whole, present the whole spectrum, if you will. The next thing is that Ursula von der Leyen, president of the European Commission, went to go see deceased victims of Bucha in Ukraine. Now, this is zero disrespect to the deceased victims of Bucha in Ukraine. I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. However, and this is regardless of which perspective you take, and I'm speaking to you as if you're at work right now, or you're watching this at home, or wherever you are. You see, the issue I had personally, this may be a controversial statement, but I feel it needs to be said, or controversial perspective, is that I saw some clips of Miss Ursula von der Leyen, quote-unquote, reacting to these deceased bodies. May the bodies may the people who passed away rest in peace, truly, regardless of which side they're on, because war of any kind is no good, and I mean that from a human angle. This is not about, Israel versus Palestine, Russia versus Ukraine. This is human on human. But Miss von der Leyen's reaction looked, fake. I honestly, it looked like it was staged, like it was pre-planned. I couldn't help but think of, again, if we take a massive step back, what's happening globally, as I'm about to report in this episode, seems to be that if the Earth was a crystal ball, or if you were a giant and wherever you tapped on the ball of Earth, an issue would arise to redirect mass consciousness to create chaos, in my opinion. This is exactly how they would do it. But again, just hypotheses. For the sake of YouTube, I want to point that out. The next thing, this just came in minutes ago as of the time I'm recording this, is that Belarus has accused Poland of hurling a stone with a slingshot at the border checkpoint in Piaszatka. Hopefully I did not butcher that. Please forgive me if I did. Again, we have to consider every angle here, folks, and I do mean that. We have to consider that it's possible Belarus used a false flag attack, as is, this is nothing new of a tactic, meaning that they'll get a spy on Poland's side to do this on purpose and say, look, Poland started it. We have to consider all of these things. We have to take, in my humble opinion, it doesn't have to be an intelligence perspective per se, but a more of a critical thinking perspective. That's all. So again, we also have to consider, is it possible that this stone that was hurled wasn't even hurled? Is it possible that it was just made up in the media? And again, or is it possible that it's entirely accurate as what's being reported here? I really do mean that. We have to consider everything. It's not just because I'm the one behind the mic doesn't mean that I know more than you guys. You see what I'm saying? So the next thing is that according to Biden, and I quote, "I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping, traveling with him. That's when I traveled 17,000 miles when I was vice president. I don't know that for a fact," end quote. The reason I want to bring this up is, and again, to be fair, I've brought up ridiculous things in my opinion that, the people in the Trump administration, in my view, have said in the past too. If you go back far enough, you'll see some of those clips. But what I'm trying to, or those episodes, what I'm trying to say here is that how can he be running things with the way he speaks? Now, granted, you could say, Dave, maybe the sentence was taken out of context or what have you. Okay, even if it was, guys, I'm not trying to be political here. He called Ukrainians Iranians at the State of the Union. I mean, he fell asleep at that climate conference a handful of months ago. I mean, I really do mean it. And to be honest, I'm about to say the same thing about Boris Johnson shortly. You'll see. Now, the next thing is that 2 men were found not guilty of attempted kidnapping of Governor Whitmer due to FBI entrapment, and a mistrial has been declared for the other counts. I'm going to be honest with you, folks. For those who think the FBI is squeaky clean, let me tell you. And look, I used to be hesitant to say it, but I'm just going to say it because I don't care anymore. In my opinion, there is an off-the-books allegiance within the FBI that covers their own over anything else. And I'm going to stop there. We delve into much more on Patreon, and at the end of this coming week, you'll see we have Miss Maria Farmer returning to the show. And let's just say that there's more to reveal about things like that shortly. The next thing is that Shanghai's draconian and inhumane zero-COVID lockdown leaves residents desperate for food and medicines. Authorities now say they will ease restrictions after another mass test in China's, a mass protest, I believe, in China's most populous city, or a mass test, excuse me, of this zero-COVID lockdown, according to Disclosed TV. Now, again, let me be very clear. I do like Disclosed TV as a reporting outlet, but we have to look at many different outlets because, to be fair, Disclosed TV said here, and I quote, Shanghai's draconian and inhumane zero-COVID lockdown. Yes. Is it, honestly, in my opinion, is it inhumane? 1,000,000,000%. But it's not for me to decide and say, okay, this is what it is and just lay it out like that. Even if it's very clear of what it is or could be. Again, all respect to Disclosed TV, I just want to point that out because they normally don't give their... well, anyways. We'll move on. The next thing is that, speaking of Boris Johnson, he's meeting Ukraine's Zelensky during an unannounced visit to Kiev. I believe this was yesterday or the day prior, as of the day I'm recording this. I can't take Boris seriously. I see Boris as slightly a step above Trudeau in terms of, the strings of the puppet. But that's just me. Again, this is my opinion. I know you folks like to hear it, but please don't let me influence you and make that your solidified decision, because my opinion could change later on. Who knows, right? Relative to new developments that come to light and new data and information, not just, I feel like changing my mind. The next thing is that China reportedly fears that the United States will topple Beijing's communist regime and accelerates its nuclear buildup, according to the Wall Street Journal. We have to consider this is also psychological justification for those in Europe and in the West to advocate for leaning towards direct kinetic conflict with China. With that being said, it's also very possible China fears this as well. Again, unless we know what's going on in the intelligence community and those angles of things, it's such a distorted puzzle, if you will, or a pizza that's been slattered and thrown all over the room, metaphorically. It's not fair for me to say what is or what isn't. It's tough, guys. It's real tough. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer at the moment. I promise to follow up with you on that. The next thing is that Imran Khan has officially been ousted as prime minister after losing a late-night no-confidence vote in Pakistan's National Assembly. Again, basically confirmed what was reported last week or last Wednesday in our previous KRAKEN, if I'm not mistaken. The next thing is that the average American now has more confidence in the Weather Channel's ability to report fact, not fiction, compared to all other news outlets. That's saying something too, because again, I have to be careful because of YouTube. If we consider, the alleged things that are being put in the planes and things like this, and then relative to weather reporting, kind of ironic, if for those of you that know what I'm referring to in this regard. I got to be careful because the trails, if you know what I mean. But, yeah, so... actually, speaking of which, quick little fun story, 10-second story. I remember watching a clip where there was some weatherman, this was years ago, where he said he was reporting the weather, and he goes, well, allegedly this is being put, the Air Force is putting this in the sky, and he goes, it has these materials in it, but he goes, they'll never officially admit to that. And then he just said it with such confidence because apparently he used to be in the Air Force as well. Now, granted, just because you were in an agency doesn't mean you know everything about it. I understand that. We can't just throw that in one big black and white bucket, so to speak. But quick little side story. He said it so smoothly, it made me laugh. He's like, they're never going to tell you, but trust me, it's there, about what they're putting in the sky in terms of the entire spectrum of materials they say they're putting. The next thing is that President Macron is projected to win the first round of the presidential election in France, according to initial results. Mélenchon is at 20.1%, and Zemmour is currently only at 7.2%. So Macron and Le Pen will advance to a runoff in the country's presidential election on April 24th of this year. Again, I'm going to have to leave that there. Let's hope that this is going... There's a part of me that wants that election to be going smoothly according to the democratic process, but then we have to ask ourselves, what is the democratic process? We have to understand that the democratic process from an intelligence angle has multiple variables that affect quote-unquote democracy, and I don't say that to fearmonger. I say that just to give an alternative perspective. But again, we can speculate unless we get some type of details, and even then we got to question those details. So I'm going to leave that there for now. Well, actually, one more thing. Keep in mind that I believe Macron winning again is very important for the World Economic Forum. And I'm just going to leave that there. Take that as you see fit. I truly mean that. The next thing is that there have been manhole explosions that have caused a panic in New York City's Times Square. I saw some clips of this. Folks, at least from the clips I saw, assuming they were legitimate, right out of a movie. Like, boom. And sorry for the sound effects, but literally right out of a movie. Yeah. So we can speculate underground, deep underground military bases, and even then we have to first think, okay, what's the chronological set of conclusions that could lead us to deep underground military bases? I don't want to just say, oh, it's what's happening. I mean, could be direct energy weapon that caused it. It could be a true accident of some kind. We don't know, but we cannot rule anything out, in my opinion. And the next thing is that, excuse me, little bit of a frog in my throat today. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has suddenly declined his seat on Twitter's board, opening the door to a hostile takeover. This is interesting. There was much more detail pertaining to that about how, Twitter employees were pissed off that he was going to join, and, everything that he does is a roller coaster ride. That's his shtick, and I'm not trying to defend him. To be honest, presuming his trolling is legitimate, it's kind of funny to see trolling happen in such a serious time of current global affairs, so I don't mind that personally. With that being said, though, again, make of that as you will, folks. It's who knows if behind the scenes, like, here's the thing. He has so much money, he kind of just wakes up and does what he wants, and he could. So I don't, unless this, I don't know. I honestly don't know. If this is part of a bigger plan, if this is just him being a full-on troll, and that's it, I don't know. Now, if there's something deeper to this, please, that you folks know that I don't, please, for those on YouTube, head to the comments and let us know. We'd love to, I'll pin the comment, as I normally try and do, and we'd love to know. So, the next thing is that Russia has warned Finland and Sweden against joining NATO, arguing that the move would not bring stability to Europe. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that, quote, the alliance remains a tool geared towards confrontation, end quote. I imagine referring to the NATO alliance. Putin has in the past called NATO a vassal state, just, no real discernible power, if you will, kinetically, but rather just a vassal, an empty body to justify expansion. So that's one perspective amongst many, to be clear. I'm not saying that is what is. Speaking of which, it comes as U.S. defense officials said Moscow's invasion of Ukraine has been a, quote, massive strategic blunder, which is likely to bring NATO enlargement, end quote. U.S. officials expect the Nordic neighbors to bid for membership of the alliance potentially as early as June. Washington is believed to support the move, which would see the Western alliance grow to 32 members. The U.S. State Department officials said last week that discussions had taken place between NATO leaders and foreign ministers from Helsinki and Stockholm. Look, I'm going to be honest, folks. My mind parallels to the former head of the European Union who said, he didn't correct himself, at least as far as I understand, when he said, I've spoken to the leaders of other planets, and they're concerned about the path of the European Union. I'm not trying to say anything negative about America, not the people, but the regime in which seems to hold a power structure and, dare I say, shadow apparatus within it is what scares me. And if I'm being honest, yeah, I mean, you add more power to this alleged, if you will, NATO empire, if you want to call it, it's concerning. I don't know what else could be said in that regard. So again, ultimately it's a chess game, sadly. And I say sadly because the people that suffer are the average person, right? The next thing is that, let's see here. The tomb where the biblical figure Joseph is said to be buried has been vandalized by Palestinians among spiraling tensions with Israel. The site in Nablus in the occupied West Bank was attacked in what Israel's Prime Minister called, and I quote, a frenzy of destruction, end quote. There has been a spate or a spat of Israeli and Palestinian deaths in recent days, including deadly attacks which have caused shock across Israel. Israel has promised a strong response. The tomb was vandalized on Saturday night as Israeli forces carried out raids in the West Bank in the wake of a gun attack on a bar in Tel Aviv by a Palestinian on Thursday, which left 3 Israelis dead and 11 others injured. Okay, so basically what happened was, I believe last Friday or Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, essentially what happened was a Palestinian, as I understand it, initially attacked an Israeli in a bar. And then from there, that led to Israeli soldiers basically going... I don't want to say going nuts because I wasn't there to see it myself, but responding in kind, if you will. And when I say in kind, I don't mean appropriately per se, because again, I look at this as a human-on-human perspective. Regardless of who started it, again, more violence is not good nor justified. Now, there's a fine line between violence and defending yourself, and that's what a lot of these nations seem to use in general, not just Israel. We're defending ourselves. So again, that's when the whole angle of psychological propaganda comes into play. So that's when it's truly we must decide for ourselves and interpret as we see fit. The next thing is that the Queen has revealed, here we go. The Queen has revealed that COVID left her, quote, very tired and exhausted, end quote, after she caught the virus earlier this year. The monarch, 95 years old, was taking part in a virtual hospital visit when she described her experience to a former virus patient whose father and brother had died with the illness. The call to the Royal London Hospital last week marked the official opening of its Queen Elizabeth unit. Oh my God, okay. I can go in 9 million different directions with this. Whether it's she's not even alive anymore, whether it's she's a reptile, I'm gonna, yeah. The next thing is that, again, speaking of Israel, sorry, I should have reported this before the Queen thing, was that Israel launched new air raids on locations in Syria where Iran's Revolutionary Guards and Lebanon's Hezbollah have a presence, a human rights monitoring group said. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that loud blasts were reported on Saturday evening in the vicinity of Masyaf city in Syria's western Hama province. Again, human on human. Airstrike, it's not going to... the airstrike... I know it's easier said than done, but or maybe it actually is easier done than said. It's just that those at the top don't want peace. But it's like, just both sides stop. I mean, I know unfortunately it's much more complicated than that, and largely it's due to ego, in my humble opinion. But it's like, it's so easy to get caught up in the emotional rapture of it all, if you will. But anyways. And again, the only people that suffer are the ones that are just trying to live a normal life, and all of a sudden there's an explosion near their home. So, the next thing is that Gambian President's Party has narrowly won in legislative polls. Adam Barrow's National People's Party is short of an absolute majority in the 58-seat chamber, election results show. But again, I believe there was a narrow win there. So again, assuming it was done according to the process of that respected nation, so be it. The next thing is that the White House plans to move to blunt the effect of medical debt on home loans. Loan eligibility would no longer include what veterans and what applicants, including veterans, owe for past medical services. Again, those at the top in the private industry are trying to milk it for everything it is, and the politicians are getting kickbacks to let it happen, in my opinion. To put it simply, I could be wrong, however. But at what point you're going to stop squeezing the average person, particularly the veteran? You want to talk... Anyways, I'm reminded of the quote that John F. Kennedy allegedly said when he left a meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff about ending the Cold War. He said to his assistant, I believe, he goes, "And we call ourselves the human race." So that really resonated with me, if you guys see what I mean. So again, the next thing is that there's allegedly a metaphorical time bomb, or maybe an actual one, in Mexico City, as a Mexico City gas tank graveyard is frightening residents. The disused LP canisters emanate an unbearable odor that residents say cause severe headaches and also fears of an explosion. Yeah, you might want to get on that. Speaking of which, Mexico President López Obrador has won a recall vote amid a low turnout. López Obrador had supported the referendum, which the opposition dismissed as a distracting propaganda exercise. Okay, before the opposition, they could, it's like kids pointing fingers at each other. I really, truthfully, in my opinion, I don't care about that. Let's focus on these tanks here, these gas tanks. Okay, he won, beautiful. Whether that's part of the legislative process or not, we'll deal with that after. Get rid of those tanks. Now, those gas tanks, honestly, because that's scary stuff. Now, there's only one reason why I could see the Mexican government not being able to move those gas tanks, and it's the cartels. If there's a reason the cartels wanted to stay there, honestly, that's the best I can. Because yes, sadly, as I understand it, there's still, yeah, we'll just leave that there. The next thing is that the U.S. has jailed a Japanese Yakuza leader over alleged drugs for an arms deal. Prosecutors say that Japanese organized crime boss and three ties aimed to secure U.S.-made weapons for Myanmar, armed groups, and Tamil Tigers. Yeah, makes perfect sense. I'm not advocating for it at all, but those of you that know me, particularly from the Patreon, there is almost no difference between organized crime and politics. So again, you get a high-level organized crime boss to attempt to negotiate some arms deals for nations that are allegedly conducting coups. It's a time, I mean, it's nothing new. Nothing new. And I'm not trying to sound, cool saying that, but it's true. It's really nothing new. So the next thing is that Chinese medics killed death row inmates by taking hearts, according to a recent report. An academic study finds doctors might have removed vital organs before the executed had been officially confirmed dead. We're going to touch on that more on Patreon. I can't say too much because of the... And I would dare to argue, had I reported... Say, for example, I was able to break this story, let's say. I knew someone in China that told me this before they told the mainstream media in the West and Europe and all of this. Honestly, my channel would have been nicked for disinfo or misinfo. But now you see, because it's been reported generally, oh, it's okay now. Now, I'm not trying to pick a fight with YouTube when there isn't one, but I just want to make a point. That's all I'm trying to say. The next thing is that, and by the way, we'll be delving into that. There's much more to that in my humble opinion, specifically with the Patreon content. The next thing is that the United States has approved a $95 million Patriot weapons support for Taiwan. The potential sale is the third since Joe Biden became president in January 2021 and is quite likely to upset China. The U.S. State Department has approved the potential sale to Taiwan of equipment, training, and other services worth $95 million to support the island's defense in what would be the third arms package since President Joe Biden took office a year ago. Again, big picture-wise, if you want to compare Trump to Biden or this or that, we can go on all day about, the peace versus no peace and this. And again, I say this the same way I say with Israel and Palestine thing, just stop. Everyone's got to stop. And I know that obviously it's much easier. Well, again, maybe it's easier done than said. But to be fair, we have to consider the secrets in which these nations harbor. The question is, to what extent should those secrets be justified to stay classified? To certain levels, I fully understand. In other cases, they like to keep things secret just for the sake of it. And when I say they, I'm referring to more specifically the global superpowers, if you will, of the world. The next thing is that Australia's early plans for a dangerous encryption law has been revealed. Documents show that Canberra began seeking powers to crack encrypted communications nearly 2 years before unveiling the law. This is what I mean by genie's out of the bottle. I think there's no such thing as encryption anymore. Maybe that's too much of an assumption for me to make, but I don't know, guys. I honestly don't know. The final thing is that a Hong Kong journalist has been arrested for alleged sedition. Alan Au faces up to 1 year in prison if found guilty under a colonial-era law. It's possible, look, we can only speculate. Unless we're on the ground there ourselves, I wanted to end with this story because please keep in mind, folks, a number of potentialities could have occurred. This journalist may have actually come on to some real sensitive information, sensitive relative to how the CCP views it, not the Chinese people, the Chinese government, the regime, let me say. So again, we have to consider that as well. It's possible that they wanted to use this journalist as to set an example. It's unfortunate. It's possible this journalist may in fact did break this colonial era law, but I want to see what sedition this journalist has been alleged of is all. So with that being said, folks, I'd like to thank you so very much for actually on the right hand side here. Let me say one last thing. The NRO, National Reconnaissance Officer Organization, they are they're coming up more and more in the UFO conversation. So again, I'm not trying to say I told you so or anything like this, because we all work together here. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to put together a lot of what I do. But I just wanted to say the NRO, I think, plays a part. So thank you so much, guys, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.